What's up, YouTube? And welcome to the next episode of my PS1 Publisher Spotlight series. Today we've got a big one, and this is Namco, the company that was with the PS1 at launch and also developed arcade hardware called the System 11 and then later the System 12 that was roughly based on the PlayStation architecture. The beauty of that is it made for great arcade ports, and a lot of these games had their origin in the arcade. However, they also had a lot of Namco home-developed games that we're going to take a look at in this video as well. As I said before, this is going to be a big video. We have 31 unique titles that Namco published for the PS1, and I also have some variants we're going to take a look at over the course of the video. We'll also look at a few PS1 Namco import titles. I by no means have a full set of those, but I'll show you a few that I have as part of my collection. And then also, the other thing that Namco was big on was developing their own accessories for the PS1 that supported many of the games we're going to look at in the video. So I'll show you those Namco created accessories at the end of the video also. So with that said, I'm going to try to speed things along. I do have a lot of fond memories with the Namco titles. Many of these were some of my first games I bought for the PS1 and ones that I played the most. There's really not a whole lot of duds that we're going to see over the course of this video, and I'm really excited to bring you all of the full Namco set for the PS1. So with that said, let's go ahead and get started. I'm actually going to start with long box titles first, because that's really where they got their start. As I said, Namco was with the PS1 at the launch of the system, and a couple of these games came out on launch day when the PS1 launched in North America. So let's go ahead and get started with the long box exclusive releases. There are 5 of these. I'm sorry, they're not exclusive. Some of these had jewel case variants, but 5 long box titles that Namco put out. The first one of these is Air Combat. This was the start of a long-running series that is now known as Ace Combat, and all the sequels were then called that. They are flight sims. I am not a big flight sim type of person, but I will say that if I'm going to play something like this, the Namco titles probably have the most polish of what's out there. So, not something I would totally avoid if it was in front of me, but not my first thing to pick up off the shelf. You'll hear more about this series as we go through the video, but this is the only long box Air Combat series release as part of the set. Next is one of the ones that only has a long box, so this one's kind of unique. This is Cyber Sled. This one came out pretty early in the PS1 library. It has some really weird artwork on it. I don't know what's going on. The acid trip astronaut or something like that on the cover there. On the back, though, you can get a better idea of what the gameplay is. This is actually like an arena combat game, and it had its origins in the arcade. Plays very arcadey and honestly looks pretty cool. Has some very big graphics for the early 3D titles of the PS1. I actually enjoy playing this. It's not something I have any memories of. I didn't play it back in the day, but I do enjoy picking this one up every once in a while and trying it out. So definitely can recommend Cyber Sled. It's not too hard to find, but definitely getting a little more difficult just because it's a long box release. Next is another big one. This is Ridge Racer, and this was also a launch game for the PS1. I do have fond memories of Ridge Racer. This is one of the first games that I played on the PS1, and a lot of the games that are part of this series you're going to hear me talk more about as we go through this video, but I can say that Ridge Racer has always been one of my favorites, and I think holds up even today. You're going to see some enhanced versions of this game, but honestly, you can't go wrong with just picking up the original. It's very arcadey and quick, easy to pick up and play, and honestly, the graphics hold up reasonably well considering it was a launch title for the system. So we'll hear more about that series as we go through the video. Next up is probably one of the rarest titles in this whole video. This one I picked up a few years ago at the Portland Retro Gaming Expo, and I have not seen one of these complete like this one is in the store ever since. This one is Starblade Alpha, and this one also has arcade roots. You can get the original Starblade release on the Sega CD, and I have that also, but this is the enhanced version for the PS1. This one's also unique because it's a long box title that comes only in one of these Ridge style boxes, and these are the ones that also show the most wear, so it's really hard to find this game in the first place, but then finding one in good condition with the glue that's not all worn off on the sides and spine is definitely very difficult. Overall, this one's a rail shooter. It's a little bit dated, but obviously these were all the rage during the mid-90s, and has a suitable soundtrack and things like that to keep the action going. I do like playing this game, and I also like playing it on the Sega CD. This one has a little bit higher resolution, of course, and can definitely recommend it if you can find this game out there. I will say that this one just doesn't come up complete very often, and if you do ever get a chance to get one complete, I would definitely recommend it, because it's not likely you're going to find another one. The last one of these long box titles that we'll show you, and I also have a variant to show you later on, is Tekken, the original fighting game that Namco put out. Very groundbreaking 3D fighting game. You know, before this time, pretty much all fighters were 2D in nature, with a few exceptions like Battle Arena Toshinden. But this one really did set the bar for where fighting games went, and there was a lot of games that really were copycats of the Tekken series. So imitation is the surest form of flattery, and that's really what the case we saw with this game was. Tekken, ultimately, I did not really play much the first game, but I did get into the series later on, and I'll have a little bit more to say as we talk about some of the sequels when we get to the jewel cases. So those are the 5 long box titles. Next, I'm going to walk you through all of the jewel case releases. Some of these are variants of the games we just saw, but the majority of these are going to be unique titles as well. So, as I said before, flight sims are not really my jam, so ultimately these are some of my least favorite Namco titles. But here we have the jewel case variant of the original Air Combat. This one is not really the best of the series. I would say the other ones are a little bit more exciting. And as far as jewel case variants, this one is not the rarest of some of the ones I'm going to show you, but this one is a little bit difficult to find. And I would say if you do see this out in stores, you know, it's worth picking up. I can't remember if the first one had a greatest hits release. I know some of the other ones in the series did. I think this one does, so there's also a greatest hits version of this. I don't collect greatest hits versions, so I don't have that, but that would be another way to get the game. The next one is probably the one that's regarded the best. This is, you know, again, where for some reason Air Combat became Ace Combat, and then they stuck with Ace Combat from then on. Ace Combat 2 is the one that was really probably the most highly reviewed of the series. I remember this game got really strong reviews when it first came out, and I think that this one they did a nice job with. One thing I'll show you on this game, because it really is the starting point for a lot of the reasons I like the Namco games especially, is they also used full color artwork on a lot of their discs, and it's really nice to see. I mean, it's almost like a working designs type of thing to see the discs look like that. Not every game in this collection is going to look like that. There's a few like that Air Combat that's just have plain discs, but this one really shows off that nice style and just that little extra touch that they put in their games to make the disc art memorable. So I'll try to show you some of those as we go through these two. Ace Combat 2, like I said, well regarded, just I'm not big into flight sims, so not the best person to talk about. This next one I actually did just pick up. This is Ace Combat 3 Electrosphere. Ultimately, I got this game because I was trying to complete this subset. It's not really, again, something I'm going to play. But again, I'll show you, it does have that nice full-color artwork on the disc, so it looks pretty cool. I will pop this in and just see how it is, but ultimately I imagine it's going to be just more of Ace Combat, maybe slightly enhanced after the last one I showed you. Alright, then we took, Namco went in a different direction. They brought us Dragon Valor, which is a single disc or 2-disc game that is an action RPG, and ultimately seems to be picking up fans now. This game really wasn't that highly regarded when it first came out. I think it just got lost in the shuffle of all the Squaresoft RPGs and things like that were coming out at the time. It came out right in the middle of all that, so I just think, you know, again, it got lost in the shuffle, but now people are starting to appreciate this game. I did get this game pretty close to when it came out. I didn't buy it new, but I would say I bought it used not too long after then. And I remember playing it then, but then I think I got stuck up with some other titles at the time that were coming out. And so ultimately I've just not played a lot of this. I do think this is a callback to some of the other Dragon games that they came out with prior. So like some of the games you're going to see on these Namco Museums, Legend of Juraga and things like that, I think those have a loose connection to this game. So maybe an expert on that can correct me, but I do think they're related to those early Namco arcade titles, as well as the Return of Ishtar. That's the other one that I think is part of this series. Next is another big favorite of a lot of people, and I can definitely agree with the why. This is Klonoa Door to Phantomile, a wonderful 2.5D platformer for the PS1. Really, really enjoy this game. I made a mistake by not buying this game when it was new. I knew of it at the time. I think I rented it, and I really enjoyed it. And then I was like, I'll just wait for it to go on clearance. Well, let's just say that this game pretty much disappeared entirely and has only gone up since then, even in the late 90s. This game was starting to go up in price. So I got in on this maybe, I don't know, 8 or 9 years ago. Now it's gone up probably even double since then. And there is a remake of this on the Wii, so if you want to get a slightly cheaper version of it, you can. But ultimately, I really enjoy playing this game on the PS1. Again, this has that lovely full-color artwork on the disc. Just wanted to show that as well. This one also has just a little insert here. I think it came with this. It's a hint book for Tower of Drago. So maybe it goes with this, maybe it's supposed to go with the Namco Museums, but regardless, that's in the case here too. So, like I say, definitely can recommend Klonoa. Obviously, most people know what it is. It's a really difficult game to find now, especially at a good price. Next, we'll talk about Mr. Driller. This was a unique Namco property that started in the arcade and then came out on the PS1 as well as the Dreamcast. The PS1 version came out a few years before, and I did buy this game when it was new. I am a big fan of action puzzle games, and really, I think this late 90s period was kind of the peak of that. They just had such a nice arcadey nature to them. And this was a good callback to Namco's Dig Dug series with some more action puzzle elements to it. Really cool, high pressure game once you start to run out of air, and you run out of air faster as you get deeper in the cave, so it does, definitely gets pretty frantic if you really start playing this game, but can definitely recommend it, and always like this series. You'll hear a little bit more about this series as we go through the video. It obviously has spun off so many sequels now that it's probably a little watered down, but this one, even just starting where the series started, you can't go wrong with this one. Next is another one that I just recently picked up, so I don't have a whole lot to say about it. This is Ms. Pac-Man Maze Madness. It's kind of a spin-off of another game we're going to talk about in here. This one, it seems to be, is just mostly just mazes. It's not so much 3D platforming, which the other game we're going to talk about kind of went down that road. It does have the original Ms. Pac-Man included on the disc, which I guess is a nice extra, but obviously it's available on one of these other games you're going to look at. And it also says it supports 4-player mode, so that's kind of neat, I guess, if you want to get a bunch of people playing this together. Ultimately, again, I just picked this up because I needed it for the subset, and the other games in this video I have a lot more experience with. But even a title like this, you get that really nice full-color artwork again. There's been some other ones, too, I haven't shown you along the way. But we'll move on, and then I think next we'll talk about my background here. So here we have the full set of the Namco Museum Volume 1 through 5 set of classic Namco arcade games. And I think when you think about arcade compilations, it's kind of just become a cliche thing that started in the PS1 era and then carried on into PS2 and therefore other systems. But really, when these started, there weren't a whole lot of arcade compilations out there, and I think it was really nice the way that Namco presented these. They didn't just give you the arcade games on the disc, they gave you a full 3D interactive museum. You could look at concept art, you could play with all the music from these arcade games, you could view, character drawings and things like that were part of the design. You could look at the arcade PCBs. They really just put a lot of effort into these, and I don't think these get enough recognition. The Namco Museum thing became more of a brand, and then when it started spreading into other consoles, they ditched the museum aspect for the most part, and really just went straight to presenting the games. So I think, again, this series got a little watered down over time, so you don't get the full effect that you do with these original compilations. So of these are all the first print of these. The two that got reprints, and most commonly are found as reprints, is Volume 1 and Volume 3. There's a non-greatest hits reprint with slightly different cover art, and then there's greatest hits versions of those. Those two sold by far the best because they have the Pac-Man games on them that I think most people know the best. So I do want to walk through these shortly and just give you a little bit of idea what is on them. We'll take a look at the original Namco Museum. I bought this one very early, so I didn't have to track this one down after the fact. This one has one of my all-time favorites on it, Galaga, and then you also get things like Pole Position and Rally X and New Rally X. This one obviously has Pac-Man on it, which is the big hit. And then you do get a weird title. You get two weird titles, actually. You get Bosconian and Toy Pop. Toy Pop is absolutely bizarre and probably doesn't resonate with US audiences at all. I have never seen a Toy Pop in an arcade ever, so I don't think, even if it got imported here, it was in very, very small numbers. These were primarily developed for a Japanese audience first, so they may have been games that were more popular in Japan, but ultimately they left them intact for these US compilations. So we'll talk about Collection 2 next. So this is Volume 2. This one really is one of the more difficult ones to find. I don't think this one sold nearly as well. The games on this one just aren't really the same gravity of hits as the first compilation, but one of the games on this one is one of my all-time favorite Namco titles, and honestly I've played probably this one more than any of the other discs because this one has Mappy on it. And I do own a original Mappy cabinet now, But before then, this was my Mappy fix and where I got it from. I just played this a ton. Again, I think Mappy was a little more popular in Japan, and over here it was released, obviously, but wasn't nearly as big a hit. You do get some other interesting stuff on this one, though. You get Gapless, which is like the strange sequel to Galaga that is really not that well known. You get Super Pac-Man, which is also not that well known as far as the Pac-Man series. And then you get some weird stuff again. You get Grobda, and you get Dragon Buster, which, again, I think is related to Dragon Valor. This one also has Xevious, which, overall, it seems like Namco is really big on Xevious. I don't think it's that big in the US either, but seems to have a lot of fans in Japan. So, nice compilation here. Again, if you like Mappy at all, it's worth getting for that solely, if not on one of the newer versions of the Namco Museums you can find. Volume 3, again, a very popular volume. This one has the big hits of Ms. Pac-Man. It has Galaxian on it. Kind of weird that Galaxian came after the Galaga on Part 1, even though it's the prequel. You do get another pole position. You get Dig Dug, which is a nice title as well. And then you get some weird stuff. You get Fozon and the Tower of Druaga. So again, just some kind of lesser-known titles that they threw in the mix just to keep things fresh. This one, like I say, is obviously a big seller, and there's plenty of copies of that one out there if you want the represses especially. The last two I don't think sold nearly as well, and probably for good reason. I think they kind of front-loaded a lot of their big hits on the earlier titles. So with this one, you've got Pac-Land, which is kind of a not very impressive Pac-Man series game, which they turned into a 2D side-scroller. You get Ordine, which is a decent but somewhat unknown shooter, same with Assault. And then you also get some weird stuff yet again. You get the Return of Ishtar and the Genji and Heike clans. Very, very strange game there. So this one, again, not only are they lesser known titles, you only get 5 games, which is a little bit weird. The other ones had more games than this. And then the last one of these is the O, or Volume 5. This one I can highly recommend. This one, again, you only get 5 titles, so it's a little stingy, but it has some better stuff on it. So this one you get Pac-Mania, which is a better Pac-Man game. You get Dragon Spirit, which is a cool arcade shooter. You get Duke for your weird title, and Metrocross for another weird title. But probably the pinnacle game on this release is The Legend of Valkyrie. Excellent top-down shooter action game. It's almost like a Pocky and Rocky style game. Really well done, and an incredibly expensive arcade board to have. The only other home version of that is on PC Engine, and this one is better than the PC Engine version, so can definitely recommend this if you've ever want to give that game a try. It's excellent. Unfortunately, this volume goes for a ton of money now because, as I said before, I think Volume 4 and 5, they just didn't make a whole lot of these. Probably because the games on them are a little bit too obtuse. So, nice that we got all these in the US, and then I'll show you another entry in the series as we get through the video. So as we go through, I'm going to move on to some other titles here. I'm trying to fix my backdrop. And we'll move on into another game that was related to that Ms. Pac-Man I showed you earlier. This is Pac-Man World, and this one they tried to do something a little bit more fresh with it. There is some 3D platforming in it, but they also have some maze stages, and then you do get the arcade Pac-Man in this pack as well. This one sold very well, and there's a greatest hits variant of this, and I think there might even be a second variant of it as well. And then this one you also get the nice full color artwork on it yet again, with all the different ghosts on it, so that's kind of cool. There you can see some of the greatest hits variants of the Namco Museums, the 2 that got repressed. So that one's pretty popular. I don't have a whole lot of history with that one, but I did pick it up a few years ago, and I actually enjoyed it more than I thought I would. Next we'll get into some of the light gun games, and Namco was big on light gun games for the PS1, as well as their own proprietary hardware, which we're going to talk about later on. So this is the Point Blank game. These are a series of mini-games. They're very comical. A lot of just freshness just to mix things up. You get 70 different mini-games in this, as well as these 2 wacky Bert and Ernie looking characters that are part of the game. This one is really cool too if you have 2 gun cons, and you can have friends blast along with you. Again, you get that nice full color art on the disc. And we'll talk plenty more about that series because here we have Point Blank 2. Really more of the same, just again, 70 more mini games, variety action type stuff. And just a lot of fun, very comical, as I said before. More full-color artwork on the disc. And if that's not enough, we have the third one. You get more more of the same. Point Blank 3. So yeah, I think the Point Blank series had probably run its course by this point, but this one had 80 mini games in it, so they definitely tried to give you a lot of value for your money. And if you had a gun con, it was always nice to find new light gun releases. And then yet again, we have a full color artwork on the disc. Alright, so now we're going to talk about the Ridge Racer series a little bit more. Here we have a very rare jewel case variant black label. This is for the original Ridge Racer. I found this many, many years later after having the long box, and I thought it was a really cool variant to have. I do have the full set of the jewel case variants, and so these are just kind of part of that as well. But one thing I thought was kind of neat about this one is just the spine text on this just looks very generic. It doesn't really fit in with any of these other games, so I don't really know what the story is of why this one got the repress. The other thing that makes the repress unique is this one has full color artwork on the disc, but guess what? The original pressing does not. So it's one way to tell them apart, and if you ever do find this game in the wild, make sure that it has the original full color artwork disc that goes with it. But like I said before, the Ridge Racer series I'm a big fan of, and played a lot of the original, but we'll talk a little bit more about some of these other ones. One of the other ones that I don't have as much of a memory of is Ridge Racer Revolution. This one they rushed out pretty quickly after the first one, and I never bought it back in the day. It really is just an enhancement of the original Ridge Racer. There's some additional things that they added to it, but overall it's more of the same. They didn't do a whole ton with this one. It was really the next game in the series where they really started to branch off into their own thing. But, a nice title to have. If you only have to have one Ridge Racer of the original, you might as well get this over the classic one. Either way, you can't go wrong. Next is the one that I played a ton of. This is Rage Racer. I remember I got this game in a summer while I was in between years of high school, and I feel like I played it all summer long on break. I put a ton of hours into this game. This is where they really tried to blossom it more into a car PG, I guess you could say. They, added different, fake manufacturers of cars that were from different nations of the world. And I remember the Italian cars were the ones that you really had to save up a lot of in-game credits to buy. And ultimately there was some really difficult races as you went through this game. This one, you bought cars, upgraded cars, things like that. A little bit more detailed than the original arcade games. Overall, just a really great experience. The handling on this game is so excellent. I think that's the one thing that really, sets it apart. Again, you get some full color artwork on the disc. Show you that. But this is my original copy that I bought in the late 90s. Also just a nice touch, you get some gold foil on the cover there too. So like I say, they're almost like working designs titles. It's kind of cool. But I just don't hear hardly anyone talk about this game. I think Gran Turismo the first one came out around the same time. Everyone started playing that instead, and this one just got lost in the shuffle. I just think that this one had a nice mix of arcade and sim. It wasn't full sim like Gran Turismo, and it wasn't full arcade like the earlier Ridge Racer titles. It just had a nice balance, so I can highly recommend this one, and you can pick this up cheap. It doesn't go for much at all. And then we have the last game in the series, Ridge Racer Type 4. This one really has some nice graphics. It pushed the PS1 hardware pretty darn good. There's 2 discs included with this one. It's more of what they started to create with Rage Racer, but for some reason this one just didn't click for me the same way as Rage Racer did. I don't know if it was just that I was busier at the time when this one came out, but I didn't play it nearly as much. But it does have some nice features to it, don't get me wrong, and I think, if you really look at how watered down the Ridge Racer series has gotten these days, these original titles are very missed as far as what's out there today. So, Ridge Racer Type 4 I did buy new as well. I'll show you again the disc card on that, it's kind of cool. But, again, it's not really one I would go back to immediately compared to all the other games in the series. Another game that got its start on the PS1, or really the arcade and then the PS1, is Soul Blade. And a lot of people just really aren't familiar with this title because where it went next, it got rebranded, kind of like Air Combat became Ace Combat. Soul Blade became Soul Calibur, and Soul Calibur was the huge hit that really was the breakout launch title for the Dreamcast. Soul Blade, honestly, the gameplay is very similar. You fight with similar characters, if not some of the same ones, and you have the ring out mechanic that's the same as what Soul Calibur took forward. Soul Calibur then spun off a billion sequels until it meant nothing again. But ultimately, Soul Blade is the start of all that. I think people were expecting this to be just another Tekken, maybe when it came out, and that's why they either passed on it or didn't give it a shot. But ultimately, it's highly playable, and I think, you know, if you're a fan of Soul Calibur, you should definitely check out where the series got its start. So nice little 3D fighter that they also put out. So again, Namco wanted to bring the variety, and they brought us the Tales of Destiny series. The Tales series just continues on today with a billion sequels that it's turned into, but these were the first ones that we got in the US. I think the series ultimately started on the Super Famicom in Japan, but this is the first that we ever got, was the original Tales of Destiny. This is a really nice looking hand-drawn 2D RPG. Almost looks Super Famicom-ish in its style, so I think that's why, you know, it didn't really get the full accolades when it first came out, because there was all those 3D RPGs that Squaresoft was putting out. But definitely a highly playable RPG, and I think, you know, it has a huge playtime on this. I can't remember what the total hours is. I've never beat this one, but I know that this one definitely has some length to it, and this one is just a single disc, but it does have some really cool artwork on it. The next one we're going to look at has several more discs. It just has a lot more FMV in it, so definitely a cool RPG, and getting to be a pretty pricey one these days, too. So next up we have Tales of Destiny 2. This one I don't like the artwork on the cover as much. Maybe it's just the font of the logo. It just looks, I don't know, looks kind of low res. You can see that for yourself. Overall, this one is a much bigger game. This one has, again, some really cool artwork on the disc. This one is a 3-disc game, so you can see all the different characters on there. Again, just very Working Designs-esque in its presentation. But, you know, overall, this is part of the Legendary series. I have not put much time into this one at all, and ultimately this one is also incredibly expensive now. I just don't think they made a whole lot of these. I think the Squaresoft games took all the shelf space, and then these got lost in the shuffle, but people are wanting to go back and try them out, especially because the Tales series has gotten so much bigger now. Alright, let's talk about some more of the Tekken series. So here is the jewel case variant of the original Tekken. This one is semi-difficult to find. I do see it every once in a while, but you do get, you know, a more compact package if you prefer to have this on your shelf than the full-size long box. Like I said, I don't have a huge history with the original Tekken, but definitely can see why it has its fans. But next we'll move on to Tekken 2, and this one is a much more popular release. This is where I initially started playing Tekken. We used to play this in the game store I worked at back in high school. We had it set up on one of the TVs in the store, and I remember a few of the employees there were big fans of this, and we used to play it quite a bit. So this one, you do get the full color artwork on the disc. You don't get that with the first one, unfortunately. But definitely a cool 3D fighter. And obviously spawned many, many sequels, including this one. This is Tekken 3. This one is really where they went all out. This is the first one that I bought new myself. It does have that gold foil on the cover, kind of nice. But this one, they just gave you a ton of value with this one. This one has a ton of mini games in it and side quests and things like that. You could play Tekken 3, I mean, for months and probably not do everything there is to do in this game. But overall, just a really well-polished 3D fighter package. The graphics on this one are really sharp. You know, it shows off what the PS1 can do. I can remember that when this came out, we really, you know, stood back and took notice at like what they were pulling off with the PlayStation. Namco was pushing it pretty hard, and game plays very smoothly, so I can definitely recommend that. We'll talk about some more light gun games. Here we have Time Crisis, the first one, and this is obviously an arcade origin. Plays well with the gun con. I can definitely recommend it. And again, you get some full color artwork on the disc. And then if you like Time Crisis, there's also a sequel to get. There's Time Crisis Project Titan. Really more of the same, but plays well again with the gun con and easy to play. Has a lot of mini games and things like that they added for this one just to increase its value. This one, the artwork on it's a little bit blah. It's not as exciting as some of the other ones, but overall, a excellent light gun game if you have a CRT TV and a way to play this. It's worth checking out, or you can play it with the controller if you don't have a light gun and you want to use your modern TV. It does play okay with the controller. Just plays better with the gun con for sure. Alright, next we have a weird one. This is the last of the 31 or so unique titles in the series, in the set. This is Xevious 3D G+. I don't think the Xevious series was a big hit in the US, but overall it was probably a little bit more popular in Japan. This was actually an arcade game that got brought to the PS1, if I understand correctly. I don't see this game very often. It doesn't go for a ton of money, but I just don't think it's really taken off yet. Maybe it will at some point. It does have the original Xevious arcade game included, as well as I think Xevious 2, which is something you don't get in the Namco museums. But this one is overall a 3D translation of the Xevious arcade shooters. I just am not a big fan of the original Xevious, and so it's tough for me to be on board with the sequel. But it does exist. It was one of the earlier Namco titles, and I guess just nice to have collecting-wise, but not essential for gameplay-wise. So that is, like I said, the full set of the 31 or so unique PS1 US releases by Namco. I did want to take a couple minutes and go through some Japanese exclusives I have in my collection. None of these, or this is by no means a Japanese exclusive Namco set. There's many, many more titles they released there that we didn't get, but these are a few that I thought were worth adding to my collection. So I'll go through these pretty quick. First one of these is Klonoa Beach Volley, and this one is actually still sealed. I bought this back in the day and just never opened it. It is the Klonoa characters in a beach volleyball game, and I don't really know what possessed them to do this, but they did. One thing that's kind of unique about it is you can share a controller. You and a friend can play on either side of the controller, so I guess if you're just cheap and you don't have a lot of controllers, or you want to do 4 players with 2 controllers, you can do that. And have a bunch of people sit next to the couch and play on a very single controller. Just a nice little feature of it, I guess, if you want to have 4-player volleyball action with a couple controllers, it's an option on this. I talked fondly about the Mr. Driller game before, and there was a sequel that we got in the Japanese PS1. This is Mr. Driller G, or Great. Just really more of the same, but it has some nice little side quest modes and things like that to keep the game fresh. It really just, tries to make it almost like a little mini RPG. There's just some storyline and things like that they've added, as well as the entry of Mr. Driller's father, who is Dig Dug. I think they call him Taizo Hori in this game, but ultimately he is one of the featured characters in the game, as the connection of Dig Dug and Mr. Driller is now clear. I talked fondly about the Namco Museum titles. There was one more that Japan got. Unfortunately, we did not get this one. This is Namco Museum Encore, and if you put it at the end here, it has a little registered mark. That's why it has the R and a circle on the logo there. So this one has 7 games on it. They give you a lot more value with this one. You got King and Balloon, Motos, which I'm a big fan of, Sky Kid, decent side-scrolling shooter, Rompers, which is a really weird action puzzle game. You get Dragon Saber, which is a great sequel to Dragon Spirit. I can't remember which one this is. Wonder Momo, maybe? I'm not positive. But probably the pinnacle release on this one is Rolling Thunder. I've always been a big fan of Rolling Thunder, and they did a nice job bringing this to the PS1. So I wish we had gotten this compilation in the US, but if you have a way to play Japanese PS1 games, I would definitely get this, especially if you're chasing down the full set of these. It's well worth having this one, too. One of the other light gun games that Japan got is O Bakyun, or Ghoul Panic, I think it's known in Europe. Unfortunately, the US didn't get this game, but it's a highly playable light gun game that was an arcade release. I've also seen the arcade cabinet of this, and I can highly recommend this one too, if you like the light gun releases. And then the other one I recently got, this one's intended for younger audiences, but it's also a light gun game. This is Rescue Shot Bubibo, I think is the way it's pronounced. Ultimately a kind of rail action light gun game where you guide a character along a course and shoot all the things that are trying to attack them. Plays pretty well, but overall, not super deep gameplay like some of the other ones are that are in the series. So those are just a few of the Japanese exclusives I just wanted to show. The last thing as part of this video, and I know this video has been very long, but hopefully you're sticking with me, is all of the Namco accessories that they put out for the system. So Namco was a big supporter of first-party, or not first-party, but licensed hardware for the PS1. All of these are fully licensed by Sony, so none of this is like third-party knockoff stuff. So I don't know how you want to classify that, but they did some innovations with some of these accessories that I definitely think is worth showing. One of these was very early. This is the NedgeCon, and this was released soon after Ridge Racer came out. Supported by many games, actually. Racers that are non-Namco titles, there's many of them that do support the NedgeCon. Very unique controller if you've never held one of these. It has, it twists. That's the gimmick with it. So basically you can steer it like a steering wheel with twisting the controller left and right. And it feels very weird to get used to at first, but honestly it's pretty comfortable once you're playing Ridge Racer and some of the games that optimized for it. It also has analog buttons on it, so if you look at the A and B button, they kind of have a sponginess to them because they have a full analog range of motion on them. And then you have some other buttons that are digital, so these two up here. And then also the trigger buttons are analog in nature, I believe. They seem to have that sponginess to them too. The D-pad on this is very stiff. It's nothing exciting at all. So ultimately, if you're using it for a racing game, you should be using the twist control anyway, and you wouldn't need the D-pad. The back of the controller is also pretty comfortable. It has just these nice little notches on the back, so you can grab it, which is it's pretty important to have a good grip on it with twisting it left and right and everything like that. I've had this one for a long time, and it's honestly a very solid piece of hardware. So I can highly recommend that if you like the racing games, and there's several that are worth checking out with the NedgeCon. Next is another Namco racing controller. This one came out with Ridge Racer Type 4. There was a limited edition that came with this controller. This is the JogCon. And ultimately, I think Ridge Racer Type 4 is the only game that fully supports it. So unfortunately, there's just not a lot to use with this. But it does make the game better, so it's worth checking out. The gimmick with this one is you have this wheel in the center, and it actually is weighted. So kind of has a... You can hear the sound with it there. Basically, you can put your thumb on it and then guide your way through it. It is force feedback, so when you're racing in the game, it will actually fight you like an arcade wheel would in an arcade racing game, and it's a pretty neat gimmick with that game. I just wish more games had had supported this. It is actually a nice digital controller if you don't use the wheel. Just has a nice feel to it. You got typical trigger buttons. Really, like the original PS1 controller, except the handles are a little bit longer on this, and it's pretty comfortable to hold. But if you do have the chance to use this with Ridge Racer Type 4, it's definitely recommended. I prefer the NedgeCon just because, it's has a bigger library of games that play with it, but the JogCon is pretty cool in itself, too. I mentioned this several times through the video. This is the GunCon, and I think many people are familiar with this. This was a very popular accessory. Works with the 5 GunCon titles that Namco put out in the US, as well as some of those Japanese exclusives, as well as also some of the third-party light gun games support the GunCon also. I've already done a full video on all the compatible games with the GunCon, so you can check that out if you're interested. But ultimately, this is a really good quality gun. If you compare it to all the other light guns of the era, what made this one unique is it has a direct link into your video in, so it gives it a more pixel-precise control than the other light guns did, and that was one of the things that it used to its advantage for really good gameplay. Next we have a weird one. This was only released in Japan and I just recently got it. This is the Namco Volume Controller or Paddle Controller, and really works well with games like Arkanoid and things like that. It has a nice analog feel to the wheel. And then you have 2 action buttons here that you can use for games that support it. But ultimately it's usually like block breaker type games that this works with. There are a few exceptions. I'm trying to get some more of the games that work with this, but it does play well with the ones I have that's fully supported. And I think that, had this been a little bit more supported by Namco, they might have released it here. I do think Europe got this, but Taito put it out in Europe, but it seems to be the same controller, just it's in a teal casing instead. So overall, kind of a cool little piece of hardware. Just ultimately, we didn't get this in the US. And the last piece of hardware I want to show you, or accessory, is the Namco arcade stick. This came out pretty early in the PS1 library, and we did get this released in the US. It has some nice features that we take for granted with arcade sticks now. It does have a nice clicky joystick to it, and the arcade buttons have a decent feel to them. Maybe not full like Sanwa and Famitsu quality, but decent at least. Really nice metal base to it. Some good heft. It's not super thick, but it does have some good weight to it. And I think that these are starting to get more appreciated now as time goes on. So I've noticed the prices of these have gone up. I got this one a really long time ago, and I've always enjoyed using it for my PS1 fighting games and things like that. Works well with some of the arcade games, puzzle games, things like that too. So nice to have one of these, and again, a fully licensed piece of PS1 hardware by Namco. So pretty cool that they put that out as well. So that is, I know, a very long video and a good full tour into the Namco subset for the PS1. Hopefully you enjoyed this. I have some other publishers I was thinking about doing this for. I don't have full sets on some of the others that I would like to do, so maybe I would look at doing things like Capcom, but ultimately there's just so many Capcom games for the PS1. It's a little tough to get the full library. But you can let me know what you think. Maybe you want to see some other publishers, and I can take a look and see if I can do those with my collection. Thank you very much for watching. Please take a moment, like, comment, subscribe. Let me know what you think. And I will talk to you soon. Have a great day or night, wherever you are.